So, Dr. Geeta, thank you very much for accepting our invite to address the university students from India and abroad. And we are really thankful to you for spending time. I know you are a busy person. Even on social media and all other platforms, I see you. And besides your academic, duties, you spare time for all these things. So before I ask you to begin the address, I would like to tell the student that she will be speaking on India-China relations, particularly India-China relations after 2014, with a background from 47 to 2014. So, Dr. Geeta, I think now you can pick up and you can begin your.
Let me just check if I can go with the other computer.
No, you take your own time. No problem. No time problem. You please take on.
Just see if that works properly. I mean, I just joined in another one, Zoom.
No, I can see you. I can see you. I can hear you.
No, I'm just saying there's another this thing which I joined.
No, you are here. You are before us.
Chalo, take it. Then I'll just...
Okay. Oh, yeah. Now you can start.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. And thank you especially to Gorji for, this special invitation, giving me opportunity to talk on India-China relations. And it's a very good, I've seen some of the videos of your programs, and it's a very good initiative, especially for the students, there are multiple, things that people are talking. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about India-China relations in a very, broad framework, not going into the nitty-gritties. If somebody has some questions or something, they can just ask me about it, right? So let me just start by, talking about the global realities in which we are living, right? So what we see in the global reality today is that power is shifting from West to Asia. This is what everyone is talking about. There is an economic cloud on the rise in Asian countries. Asian linkages and connectivities are becoming very important. Then there is geoeconomics and geopolitics, which is the guiding all the alliances in the world. The global order itself is, shifting. But at the same time, what is very significant is that Asia is, having a rise, and there are multiple sets of issues that we see in Asia, especially the political issues. Okay. And there are various kinds of contradictions, whether in terms of civilization, culture, and things like that. In that context, I think the two major powers in the world, that is China and India, become very significant. Now, when I see in India, what are the realities of India that we are talking when you're talking about the whole relationship or the role these two countries play in the global matrix? One, India has called for Make in India, right? That is very significant. India is a stable government and is marching to a period of sustained growth. And this is becoming very important to us. And then we have, India is like really keen on connectivity projects, cooperative engagements. It is adopting certain policies that we'll talk about, like the Act East policy as a bridge of connectivity ties, and it's promoting cultural connections. Okay. And at the same time, there are small and neighboring powers, that see India as a big brother. And there are issues of India, in terms of bureaucratism and things like that. But India desires to play an active and constructive role in the region as well as at the international level. Now, when I see China, what is the China's realities that we are talking about when we talk about the relationship? First of all, we need to understand that China is already a risen power. It is challenging the global leadership. Okay, China is keen to build networks and alliances. Its small and middle neighboring powers have economic challenges from China's rise, but also an opportunity to grow together. China has serious issues with its neighboring countries, and of course, India is one that we will be talking about. And China desires to take the leadership position in the region as well as at the global level, right? Now, when I talk about all of these issues, what I'm looking at is, certain kinds of issues in the relationship with India's proposition of neighbor first approach. What is China's reciprocity approach? This is the fundamental issue that we'll be talking about today. Then when Xi Jinping is calling for building communities of common destiny for mankind, or what we call it as a community of shared destiny for mankind, with a purpose to redefine the relationship with all neighboring states, including India, and it is forming alliances with some countries in the neighborhood. How does India participate in this kind of, engagement politics? This is very crucial for us to understand. Then both India and China are marching towards creating strong nations with some nationalist fervors. India is calling for an Akhand Bharat, and China's vision is for rejuvenating Chinese nation. Okay, under these national rhetorics, what challenges exist for cooperative engagement is the critical issue that we are going to discuss today. Okay. Now, when I'm going to talk about all of these issues, the main propositions that I'm going to make is that Modi's active engagement with neighboring states reorients India's foreign policy towards pragmatism. Okay, this is the first proposition that I'm going to make. Then the second proposition that I make is that China supports Modi's pragmatism, as Chinese government emphasizes on development, which is the central policy of national development and for establishing strategic diplomatic ties with other countries. Okay. The third proposition is that China has proposed connectivity and linkages through the Silk Route that it is talking about, that is the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. And India is, mooting its own, policies like the Act East and the Sagar, all of these. But connected nations through land and sea is a challenging task. Okay. The fourth proposition that I make is it is unlikely that China will be the sole superpower in the region. Okay. And the last proposition that I make is that power sharing and power relations are redefined, leading to creations of a new Asia that we see today. Okay. Now, in terms of international relations, there are three main schools of thought that we always talk about when we talk about relations between two countries or more. The first is that we talk about realism. Okay. Now, in terms of realism, Thucydides, Machiavelli, and Hobbes, they have all talked about this, the anarchic system where state power is the core, as only through power, that is military, economic, or diplomatic power, state can defend itself, themselves, and state can create international law and institutions. However, it is in the interest and power relations will define states' behavior. This is what we talk about in realism. And of course, there is often, offensive realism, defensive realism, and parts of it. And I'm not going to go into details of all those theories. The second school of thought is basically talking about the liberalism. Okay, the Woodrow Wilson, Andrew, Moravcsik, and all of them have talked about it. In that, we talk about the national characteristics of individual state. All states have some goal and behavior, i.e. pursuing wealth or survival. And individual and private groups and not the state are the main actors in it. And states serve the interest of their society, which determines states' behavior. And then within the theories of liberalism, we have post-liberalism, neoliberalism, and all of that, right? Then the third broad framework or the school of thought is the constructivism, right? Wendt, Michael Burnett, all have been talked about. Now, in this, military power, trade relations, international institutions, or domestic preferences, all have certain, social meanings. And this meaning is constructed from a complex and specific, mix of history, ideas, norms, beliefs, okay, which is essential for all kind of state behavior, right? And social context is the core in this, and hence ideas are, identified according to that. Now, under all of these schools of thought, what is very interesting for us is to understand the, the interpretation for China's rise. Okay? Where do we place China's rise, and what are the challenges for that? Now, in terms of that, there are different kinds of schools of thought that have emerged. One is the Beijing consensus thought, okay, whereby a China model was, mooted. Say, for example, Joshua Cooper Ramo, he talked about, the Beijing consensus. He says that China's economic development is a model, which is an alternative, okay. And then there was the second model, which was mooted, which was called the peaceful rise model. So China was projected as a country which is rising peacefully, and scholars in China dwell on this the kind of power China will become. And here there were debates about whether it will be a peaceful rise, or there will be a hegemonic rise, or what kind of a world it will create, whether it will be a harmonious world and things like that. And the third school of thought was talking about the expansionist empire with tributary system. So China will eventually, establish a new regional political structure with East Asia tributary system that was prevalent somewhere in the Ming Dynasty, say in 1368 or 1644, during that period. The fourth model that is being talked about is the Thucydides trap, whereby, Graham T. Allison is talking about, American political science and professor at the John Kennedy School of Government. He talks about the trap in which both US and China will engage, and there will be escalation of, towards war. Then we are talking about China as a middle income trap, whereby middle income countries would have the higher income status, and due to some problems within the economy, it will be not in operational, there will be adverse factors into it. And the last was the mayor's dilemma that we were talking about. It is to strike a balance between the growth and stability. And why I'm talking about all of these school of thought for China's rise is because this is where the contradictions between two rising powers emerge, right? How China is being viewed in the global scenario, and how India is being viewed in the global scenario. Now, in terms of India, we all know that India is, again, rising power. It is an emerging economy in the BRICS. There are also constraints of whether India will fall in the middle income trap or not. There are concerns of it having its own nationalistic problems, especially with terms of, how the BJP government will take forward and all of that. And there are issues about whether India will also form alliances with other countries or not, whether it will continue with its new, non-governmental, non-alliance kind of, strategic theme. Now, in all of these, what is my theoretical foundation for today's lecture is that I find, that India's reoriented policy towards China in the wake of new regional and global realities. This is what I'm going to look at. And it is all based on a pragmatic approach. Okay. So basically what I'm doing is I'm looking from India to China, that kind of a relationship. And I'm really proposing that India looks at China from a very pragmatic point of view, and it is dealing among states and creating harmony in existence with benefit as the motive in order to understand the current engagement and the geoeconomics that is redefining our India-China relationship. Okay. The addition to this existing structural framework from my point is that there is an adoption of self-help, while some contents of other theories are also contested in this. It excludes the content of additional frameworks and adopting a new, content of realist assumptions of material power defining the national interest. This is very crucial when we talk about India's rise in the current global scenario. And the pragmatic approach also places economic engagement at the heart of building relationship while dealing with other historical issues through active dialogue and confidence building measures. So these are my propositions. Okay? Now, what is China's approach towards pragmatism is in early 80s, of course, we talk about Deng Xiaoping's pragmatism by rejecting Mao's idealistic framework. Deng Xiaoping, the second leader of, the second most powerful leader of China, also talked about seeking truth from facts to create socialism with Chinese characteristics that again focused on material well-being of the people. He was talking about, the idea of material interest, which were linked to practical actions. And Deng was also envisioning a world that was more or less peaceful relating to the, place it was keeping. So these were all the propositions that we had about China. So before we actually proceed to understanding how India and China engages, let's just understand, very broadly, where does China exist? What are its policies which define China today? And broadly, I'm just saying that, China has, some provincial policies of development, stability, and security as the main objective. It is stressing on development of the Western sector, which is where we are linking today. And then there is a policy of developing borders and enriching the people, which is where Tibet is located, and the issues of Tibet will come up. And then its policy stress on decentralization of funds, okay, while creating some interdependencies with other economies. And while that is being done, so its regional policies, again, linking to that is that it is talking about boosting intra-regional trade cooperations. It was also already talking about, some initiatives of railway networks and constructions and projects which are linking to Kunming, Bangkok highways. It was talking about the greater Mekong sub-region, where again, India was, taken into loop. There was a BCIM corridor. China was talking about. India again was a part of it because Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar was all of them were connected to it. And then it was proposing a 2-corridor and 1 rim regional cooperation between other, states from Guangdong and Yunnan to Vietnam and all of that. And most importantly, it is now talking about the, umbrella project of President Xi Jinping, that is the BRI, that is the Belt and Road Initiative, or the Silk Route that we're talking about. And in this Silk Route, the important thing we need to understand is broadly, this Silk Route had 3, routes: the Northern Western Silk Route, the Southern Maritime Silk Route, and Southwestern Silk Route. I'm talking traditionally, right? And so historically, the Southern Western Silk Route is the oldest, established 200 years ahead of the Northwestern Silk Route. And this is where, India comes into being, because from, say, 2000 years back during the Han Dynasty, covering an area of, say, 2000 kilometers, this route was, the Southern Western Silk Route was the route which is called the Shu-Yuan-Tu route in China. Basically, Shu is for Sichuan and Yuan-Tu refers to India. So the India connections to China was historical in that sense, okay? And then, of course, there were other routes which were, the routes which were connecting to India through Myanmar and all that. And I'm not going to talk in detail about the BRI. But what are, China's economic pursuits is that China's reform and open door policy in 80s, had an objective to develop by 2050. So this is where the target of China stays. The rise of Xi Jinping has, promoted the notion of building new vision under the China dream that we've been talking about. And it focuses on 2 centennial, goals. One is to build a moderately prosperous society with the goal of elimination of poverty by 2023 now. Earlier it was 2021, but they could not achieve that. And then by 100th anniversary of establishment of the PRC, of the Chinese Communist Party, they will be building a prosperous, society. The second goal is that it wants to become a fully developed nation by 2049. That is the 100th anniversary of the PRC, the establishment of Chinese, People's Republic of China. Now, for attaining these objectives, Xi Jinping has outlined, a specific time frame by 2035 and from 2035 to 2050. So by 2050, it will become a leading global power and attain common prosperity. And that is where it is now talking about shared destiny of mankind, right? Now, in terms of, President Xi, there is one significant aspect which is called as the China Dream. And this China Dream, in his explanation, which was actually proposed in 2012, is that it was a desire to realize the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Now, this is very crucial for our understanding about India-China relations, because this will redefine what China is today and what China will be today. Okay. And in terms of this national rejuvenation, the project, China is, as I said, these are two sentinel goals, and China is looking forward to, creating a renaissance of its own, with its own philosophy of different kind of rule that will be creating. Now, under that, if I see, the vision of China itself is a very mega vision. Of course, it is talking about building up, what we call the Belt and Road Initiative, where it is talking about the open door policy, but it is also talking about connectivity projects, and it is talking about going global. And it is also under this BRI, it is also talking about creating the community of common destiny, or what we call as community of, shared destiny for mankind. Okay. Now, when we talk about this, on an overall, let me just put it like China's ambitions or the interest, I would say, broadly into three aspects. Okay. One is the economic interest, of course, where it wants, hydropower projects and connectivity projects, sub-regional trade linkages, trade routes, and domestic development. Then there are security interests, which is about the, territories, which is about the safety and stability of the peripheral areas, which is where India becomes significant. It is also talking about Tibetans and Uyghurs and their linkages to transnational regions. Again, India becomes significant there. And then there are, money laundering, human trafficking issues of security, where also we have linkages with the neighboring countries, including India. And the third, interest broadly is about the regional and global interest. In this, we have the China threat, challenges the regional status. Then there are disputes with neighboring influences, challenges to regional position from rising and emerging powers, and then the alliances and partners that it wants to create. Okay. Now, in terms of India's approach to pragmatism, until 1990, India was dependent on Nehruvian romanticism and moral posturing. The approach was more on rooting out colonialism, racism, suspicion on superpower, and the proclamation of non-alignment. Okay. And the position of Nehruvian idealism was more on the values of ideological liberalism of changing the world rather than national interest based on material pursuits. And since BJP was the only party which was declaring non-alignment as irrelevant with the fall of Soviet Union, in 1998, nuclear test was a principal change position of India. And India's approach to pragmatism was also based on looking at the world as clash of interest and pursuit of individual states to seek power. And since 2014, there is a total negation of Nehruvian idealism. And India has a slight implementive continuum in position. Okay. If there is some problem with my net, please do tell me. I think there's some issue which is slow. In terms of Indian economy and reforms, India is a stable government as we know today. It is marching towards a sustained growth. It will be somewhere USD 10 trillion economy by 2032. That is what is projected today. There are various kinds of reforms that we are talking about. We are talking about, fighting corruption, and it's moving towards urbanization, infrastructure development, and eradicating poverty, which are major issues. It's talking about implementation of, procurement norms and things like that, right? Now, and so broadly, what India is doing, it has the policies and programs of Make in India, which is very crucial when we talk about China, because China has been the world factory because of made in China products, and India is moving now. India wants to again build 100 smart cities. China has already done with the special economic zones as a success and free trade economic zones. India is also talking about digitalization in the large scale. It's skilled India, it's talking about, and renewable wind energy and all of these issues. And then there are, foreign policy objectives of Sagar and Look East and all of these projects. So broadly, what is India's interest? As we talked about China's interest, India's interests are, again, I can term it into economic interest, that is to boost, inter and intra-regional and pan-Asian trade cooperation, highway projects, export economy, and then it's talking about enhancing Indian exports. Okay. In terms of security interest, again, it is talking about linked territories, trans-border intrusions, terrorist activities. It's talking about human trafficking, drug trafficking, illegal migration, and all of that. In terms of regional and global interest, India is looking at Indian Ocean as a sphere of contestation, talking about disputes with neighboring countries, challenges to its regional goodwill, and creating, shared destiny again, and seeking cooperative partners in the region, right? Hello. Hello.
No, it's all right. It's all right. No problem.
Hello.
Yes, please go on.
Yeah, I think there's some problem with my net today. But anyway, okay. So in terms of, the relationship, if I go, very broadly talking about the past, historically, India was the first non-socialist country, as we know, to have established diplomatic relations with China. But after signing the Panchsheel Agreement, in 1954, both India and China were basking in the love story of Indijini Bhai Bhai, as we know, right? With the accumulated effort to oppose imperialism and colonialism. So the assumption was that the newly independent states would be able to form a principal position for bilateral relations that will avoid conflict and the possibility of war. However, the romanticism of love collapsed in 1962, as we know, with the border conflict and the irrevocable damage that it made on India-China as something called as the permanent adversaries at that point of time. In 1978, both the countries made efforts to renew this relationship with re-establishment of diplomatic ties. That was marked by a landmark visit of the then Indian Minister of External Affairs, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, to China, which was followed by the then Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Hua's visit to India. So a new hope and warmness in relationship was supported by the signing of a joint during Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's visit to China in 1988. So the need to restore friendly relations based on the principles of Panchsheel was re-emphasized, and the path to improvement in ties was further mooted with the opening of Natula Pass after 44 years in 2006. So the mutual, understanding was that the border trade will ease tensions and enhance cooperation. This was the understanding with which we started in, say, 2006. Okay. And by 2008, we saw that China became the largest trading partner of India, and the relationship was extended to strategic and military ties. And so in 2015, when Wen Jiabao had visited India, both sides agreed to increase bilateral trade to US $100 billion by 2015. And they were looking to create an Asian century with the joint effort of both countries. So this kind of romanticism was going on between India and China. And if we see in terms of the interest of both the countries, India and China, both are in the transitional phase of marching towards from a very poor and backward, developing country to technologically advanced modern states. And this modernization march of the world's most populous countries also meant that both will face huge internal challenges to root out poverty, deal with internal factors of instability, invest huge amounts in infrastructure building, and create opportunities to build the skill of the populace. It also means that both countries not only need to generate internal resources to cater to the growing needs, but also depend on external opportunities based on sharing and cooperation that can help sustain high growth of economies. Now, India's lack of long-term vision at that point of time had made the progress very slow. Okay, but with the rise of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to power, a new definition to the pragmatic approach of liberalism has been initiated since was there. We started liberalism in 1991. Since that, right? And the rigor now is to build a new India under the banner of what we call as Make in India, with policies aimed at creating 100 smart cities, as I told you, and of course, talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat. Okay. Now, this is where, we have a different kind of India's vision and concerns for China. Now, India definitely looking at today's China, as I explained about China's approach of BRI, India is not very keen on this Silk Road, or BRI project, especially because of the, CPEC corridor, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which infringes upon our territorial integrity and sovereignty issue. And beyond that, there are main concerns of India is about the traditional security, but also economic, concern, which is trade deficit, is one of the most important concerns with China. While our, bilateral trade has already surpassed, say, US dollar 135.98 billion US dollars, but the trade deficit is also increasing. Say in 2021 to 2022, our trade deficit with China was 73.3 billion US dollars, and is expected to cross $100 billion mark by this year, right? So this is one important concern or vision which India has. Now, India is also apprehensive of China's motive and in interest to raise regional cloud, including the entry into the SAARC, South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation. India is definitely promoting the East-West, connectivity through Myanmar, and of course the BCIM project in which China is there. But some view, the projects which India is moving independently with Myanmar and Thailand or even Vietnam as a counterbalance to China, right? Because China is talking about the north-south connectivity to Southeast Asia. India is advancing its Act East policy, so which is again looked at as an alternative to China's expansion. And there are scholars which are, putting this whole notion of one culture, one region, as a broad framework of India's cultural expansion, which again China views it as a cultural, soft power expansionist tendency of India, and so there is a, you know, um, I say, misunderstanding between the two states, right? India is, of course, opposed to protectionist policies, and India stands for global economic governance architecture, where China is promoting its own governance structure, and India advocates some kind of joint initiatives. But what is going to be really, significant for India and China is that India is now the second largest populous country in the world. Okay, and its population of 1.4 billion has already surpassed China. It has more than 50% population which is below the age of 25, and more than 65% which is below the age of 35, which is going to give an advantage to India in terms of how China progressed in terms of low-cost labor. So this is where, the kind of contestations will come in. By 2020, on an average, India had something called, an average age was 29 years, and India's dependency ratio is going down. So by 2030, probably we'll have, say, 0.4% of dependency ratio, but China is aging population, right? So these dynamics of how India's middle class will play and how China's middle class will play will also reshape how India and China will, interact with each other. Now, in talking in terms of, the whole notion of connectivities and, of linkages, one of the important things that we need to understand about India-China relationship is that there are broken narratives of old theories that reflect the confrontation, cooperation between India and China. Right, the older rules of game of power politics with which each country used to play, I think Modi and Xi has broken down into new kind of practices. And they are both advocating something called as a mutual benefit for the people of both India and China. And at the same time, they both are, advancing from their own national interest for the welfare of their own, people. This is also reflective in the approach of creating new identities and status in the global power, whereby both countries are, moving to break the comparative models. Of course, there is nothing as India against China or China against India, which is a narrative floated by the West. But there is a different kind of, promotion India made. India started by giving an olive branch to China, especially to President Xi Jinping. After, I'm talking about post 2014, there were multilateral engagements like the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, New Development Bank, SCO, BRICS, and all of these, India and China were engaging as a cooperative this thing, and there were negations of protectionism, and they both were advocating globalization with a collective view, which was reflective of the transformation to pragmatism, right? India and China were establishing exceptional bilateral relationships, sharing common spaces and bringing peaceful change to the social reality. But we saw that in 2017, when the Doklam issue happened, all these, India's approaches towards China in terms of in terms of an olive branch to China really saw a setback. Yet there were unending discord that needed to be managed rather than set aside. Okay, and India still, tried to move ahead with relationship. As we know, Modi ji and Xi Jinping met and tried to de-escalate the issue. The pragmatic approach in that sense was the basis of moving to build the relationship rather than to be entangled into this chaos of confrontations. Okay, and both leaders wish to share the spaces of mutual growth in a multidimensional engagement without overlooking the interest of respective states. There was a reiteration of this during Modi Xi's meeting in Wuhan in April 2018. So that summit itself marks, a sort of a very pragmatic approach of creating bilateral relations which are beneficial for the people of both the countries. Okay? And there was a need to let the differences not turn into disputes, which was emphasized and re-emphasized by both the leaders, right? And this was also visible during the Mamallapuram, summit, right? Now, if I see the India-China relations in the 21st century, I think we need to first understand the relationship from a power perspective, right? Now, if I see power, it is divided on the basis of three levels. We call it as big power, middle power, and small power. Now, India-China relationships need to fall into certain kinds of, placement on these, positions. Which level will it form? It will form into big power relations, middle power relations, or small power. For China, big power relationship is China and US relationship, okay? Not China and India relationship. And from India's perspective, of course, if we put India into a middle power, then it is also not a high standard of big middle power, because within these three broad categories of big power, middle power, and small power, there are again 5 categories which can be divided as the superpower, major power, middle power, medium-sized or ordinary power, and small and weak power. Now, India can be placed into the middle power, but yet India and China are not placed at equal footing when we look from the Chinese perspective. Okay, and India tries to make that point very strongly, strongly to the Chinese, that there is an understanding that you need to place us in a regional power. Okay, so this is where we are moving multilateral approaches. We are talking about multipolarization. Of course, some are also talking about pluralization of the world, but we are at least talking about multipolarization. And in that multipolarization, we see India as a pole to be playing a role in the global matrix, whereby China is only looking at the two major powers, and that is why Xi Jinping has been talking about the major power relations between US and China, and it does not place any other country into that. Now, from the Chinese perspective, the world major power is positioned and regarded as, because it is already number 2, it has only few concerns for itself. One, as I talked about, the PRI, which is already there in their constitution, in the PRC constitution. The second is the humiliation factor, which China keeps on emphasizing. And it says that, it has a perception and documentation of historical records. And this humiliation factor is where it looks at any country which is trying to, talk about sovereignty issues or any territorial issues. It becomes, a very nationalistic issue for China. And this is where the border issue that we talk about in India and China becomes very crucial, because China looks at years of humiliation as the premise for dealing all kinds of land, maritime, or other disputes with other countries. And under President Xi Jinping's vision of as I said, the Chinese rejuvenation or the rejuvenation of Chinese nation, Greater China is one aspect of whereby it wants to consolidate all its territories. If you see the new, law on foreign relations, which has just recently come out, which is passed by the parliament, is also talking about the consolidation of all land territories apart from the other territories, which will create problems because there is a perception problem between both India and China on the border. Then there is an ideological tussle which China is dealing with, because China is really mooting its own ideological foundation, whereby the earlier banner of Mao socialism is now redefined by Xi Jinping as socialism with Chinese characters in the new era. Now, this is also in their constitution and in their charter of the party, the Communist Party, and Xi Jinping is putting that in every country, it is expanding its relations. And so probably this ideological expansion or acceptance by the countries will become a major issue between India and China. Now, India, on the other hand, also has its own, targets apart from, rooting out extreme poverty. It is, going on the non-alignment policy as of now, even if, China and other countries view that India is inclined towards the West, especially to the US, after the, border clashes in Ladakh in June 2020. Uh, India is deviating from its non-alignment policy, but India is actually not deviating from its non-alignment policy, and it has been always against the imperialist forces and the anti-colonialism. It is advocating globalization and multipolarity, as I just mentioned, with an inclusive approach. Okay, so inclusiveness has been the core of India's policy, and Hindu nationalism as a binding force is one which is creating, certain kinds of frictions and nationalistic rhetoric, but it is also creating, talking about Akhand Bharat. Now, the moment both India and China are talking about their own, renaissance and rejuvenation, say China is talking about rejuvenation, Chinese nation, and India is talking about Akhand Bharat, this is where the clash of, contestation of territories and cultural expansion and civilizational, influence comes into being. Now, we have seen that in the recent Ladakh incident, that happened has actually marked a deep dent into the bilateral relationship, shaking the foundations of trust that was built up during late 80s and 90s and 2000, right? And the joint agreements that we had signed, between India and China, and say the 1993 agreement, 96 agreement, even the 2013 agreement on border issues, have all been called in for reassessment, as the two sides have critical issues now to be resolved on the border. Uh, we have managed certain issues on the border in terms of disengagement and creating buffer zones in, some areas in the middle sector of the border. But again, Depsang and Depchul, Depsang and uh, Devchok, these two areas are still remaining to be resolved, and these are very, very crucial areas to be, negotiating. And border has not been defined as of now. And still, we have just the buffer zones. Okay, the conflict management approaches and the confidence building measures have also, faced a severe challenge with the casualties on the border that we know. And this was the first time in more than, say, 4 decades that even though the bullets were not fired, but violence overshadowed the entire issue. And so this has created a lot of tensions between India and China now. Beyond that, I think the connectivity projects on the bordering areas and India's non-participation, both in the Belt and Road Initiative of China as well as in the RCEP, the Regional Economic Partnership that China proposed with other countries in the neighbor. The non-participation of India has also created some tensions between India and China. So in terms of economic, engagement and dealing, we are facing certain problems with China. But having said that, I think India's approach to China, if I see from during Japan's visit, in August 2014 by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, there was a clear articulation that the world is divided into two camps. Okay, one camp believes in expansionist policies, and the other believes in development. So here Narendra Modi ji was really pointing towards the other camp, which is where it stands and it wants China to stand, which is the development approach, right? And if China is continuing with its expansionist policies, as we saw during the Ladakh incident and all of that, then friction between the two states. In terms of the reciprocity, though China had, at that point of time, promised to invest, say, US dollar 20 billion in India, uh, and this was reiterated during Xi Jinping's visit in September 2014. But of late, we found that in India, there are many issues with the Chinese companies which are working in India, especially like the mobile companies like Vivo and Oppo and all of that. All have been found in tax evasion, and there are illegal money transactions being done. So this has become a very critical issue, as we have pointed out, right? And so what India has taken as a stand is it has also put some checks and balances on the Chinese companies which are working in India, and as well as certain apps have been stopped by the Indian government. So the relationship now stands into, a kind of complex situation, whereby it is not that we have stopped the dialogue, but there are, some negotiations will need to be, done to further improve the relationship, and which is an ongoing process. So the contestation between India and China, I think I can broadly put them into main concerns as traditional security, but even economic trade deficit and other non-traditional security issues like cybersecurity and all of that are main concerns. India also views China's entry into SAARC as a strategic to raise the regional clout. Then border conflict, as I just mentioned, between India and Pakistan is the biggest uncertainty. Between China and India is an unsettled border, disputed border is a major problem now. In terms of responsibility of the international environment, India is talking about multipolarity and multilateral institutions to be mooted, but China's approach is a little confused. It is not very clear on whether it supports India's, participation in, say, UNSC, or whether it wants to, hinge upon India. And we have seen that in many other issues as well. When China was, when India is talking about, labeling some terrorist in the UN, China is always a barrier to it, right? So there is a non-clarity from the Chinese side as to what kind of relationship they want from India, right? Then there are greater misrepresentations, doubts, and misunderstandings between the two countries. And social forces, especially the nationalist forces, are really taking a toll on the relationship. So in the conclusion, I would just say that, the border conflict between India and China has really taken toll on the kind of relationship as an approach both the leaders, President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi, started in 2014. There is responsibility will come with increased changes in the international environment, and there are push and pulls in both sides, because India is now joining. Say, India has already joined Quad. It is also boosting its relationship with US, where China is very uncomfortable. And then the nationalist rhetoric in both these countries are really creating issues. Even if we see recently when the SEO meet happened, both India and China were present, apart from other countries, Russia and Pakistan and all of that. There was no clear indication of how India and China would march ahead or move further with this, because of the, as I said, the agreements have been violated. There is a mistrust which has been created, a deep widened gap has come. Trade deficit, everything, all these issues have come up. So I think India and China will really need to not only engage in a dialogue, which is already going on, but will have to reframe new ways to looking at the relationship and rebuild their trust. At the same time, the confidence building measures, which have been literally, destroyed, will need to have a new framework of working together. On the border, unless until I feel that the border issue is not resolved, there is no clear understanding on the border demarcation. Issues will continue to crop up, and both sides will need to, just manage them up. How far both the, leaders would be competent and how the society will react is a time to see. Yeah, I'll stop here and I'll take the questions to respond.
Thank you, Dr. Geeta, for such an extensive, exhaustive coverage of India-China relations, right from the historical perspective to the present time. Really, it was a wonderful exposition of India-China relations. Now I open the house for question and answer session. Now I ask the interns to first introduce themselves and put their questions in a simple manner. Deepak, come on, Deepak, introduce yourself and put the question.
Can you be a little louder so I know what to say?
Deepak,
Hello?
interns, please ask your questions. I know you have a lot of questions. I know it. Hello.
So can I ask my question?
Yes,
Yes.
good.
Thank you, ma'am, for the lecture, first of all. I wanted to ask a question that
Put your video on, introduce yourself.
Yes, sir.
Put your video
First,
on.
introduce yourself.
Sir, ma'am, I'm Palak Tripathi. I am studying in OP Jindal Global University right now. I am a master's student in international relations.
When you are talking to the guest, you must put your video on.
So your voice is not clear right now. I cannot.
You put it on your video.
Yeah.
Palak, kindly switch on your video. That is what Dr. Gaur is saying.
Okay, thank you. Can you see me?
Yes.
So I wanted to ask a question about the recent Vietnam and India relations, especially in the South China Sea, and Vietnam being in the forefront of its India strategic calculation in South China Sea and its involvement. Do you think it's also another pragmatic approach of India to tap its sources in South China Sea and try to be a part of a dialogue that is not really, because South China Sea does not really connect to the Indian Ocean perspective of India. Do you think it's another pragmatic way of looking at China and
See, it's a pragmatic approach from the Indian side, where India is now moving to have relationship with all countries, and with Vietnam, with other Southeast Asian nations, we had traditional relationship, cultural ties, right, and civilizational linkages. Now, what India is trying to do is remove those relationships, and at the same time, because these countries also have a regional threat perception from China, they are looking towards alternatives beyond China. Okay, so Vietnam is looking towards India for defense cooperation, for other, kind of support that it wants to have. And India is, as a regional player, also has a responsibility, to act in terms of giving that support to the regional, small states. So I see that as a pragmatic approach, because on the one hand, you are looking at, regional small powers as players in the regional context, but at the same time you're giving them importance to play that role. You see, I mean, it is not about a hegemonic state trying to dictate on every country what you need to do and what you don't need to do. You see, if you see, just before the COVID period, there was all talk about China threat theory, right? What was this China threat theory? It was all about China's economic powerhouse going to take over all the small states, whether it is Nepal, Bhutan, Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos. All of these regions, including even Japan, were threatened by the power of China. So in order to balance that power, these small states were looking at as an alternative, and so they looked at India as an alternative. Now, how India is dealing, as I told you, There are civilizational and cultural contexts which India has with them. It is, rebuilding those connections with all the countries, and not just about Vietnam. It is also doing with Philippines. It's doing with, Indonesia. It is doing with Thailand. So you can see with all of these countries, and with Southeast Asia itself, India has the Act East policy, right? So under this Act East policy, which was somewhere going very slow earlier, after Prime Minister Modi came to power, he has really pushed that and said that, you have to act, not just look, because it was a look East policy earlier, and you just need to act on that. Act means what? To build those bridges, to act as a bridging. I think that is a very pragmatic approach. What China has done in terms of its regional expansion of relations with neighboring countries is the same thing.
Next question.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next question.
Can I ask a question? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you very much for a beautiful lecture. And myself, Kumari Anamika, and I'm pursuing my master's in political science. As we are talking about the expansionist policy of China, we know that it is trying to expand in every direction, be it Russia, be it India, or in Southeast Asia. There are disputes with respect to islands also, Paracel and Spratly. So somewhere in 1939, China gave this concept of 11 dash line, in which it also claimed the territory of the Gulf of Tonkin. But eventually, after a few years, we saw that it was reduced to 9 dash line, and China retracted its claim for Gulf of Tonkin, and it was again kind of returned to, I mean, the claim was retracted, and Vietnam has a control in that area. So is there any way that we can reciprocate this Vietnam thing, that that China can stop claiming our territory in I just wanted to know, be it in east or west side, like Aksai Chin, can we reciprocate this anyhow?
I don't know whether that model is the right model to look into India-China relationship at the border. But having said that, I think we have these, proposals over a period of times where, exchange, you take this, something like a package deal, an exchange of territories has been mooted. But they were not practical solutions. They were not workable at that point of time. And I think there had been issues at that point of time. And even now, it depends upon the context in which we are talking about. But India-China problem is something of a historical nature. And there are, as I just mentioned in between, is there a perception problem? So unless until we are able to deal with these perceptions, and we are able to come out with maps of what is my territory and what is your territory in a very clear, defined manner, only then we can think about resolving a problem. See, till now, the thing we have been able to manage on the border is exchange map on the middle sector, which was the least, confrontational area. But on the Ladakh or on the western sector, we have not even exchanged maps. So unless and until both the countries, and especially India has always been saying that China never comes with the maps. So unless until China comes with a map and says, this is my territory, okay, this is my map and this is my territory, which is really defined in their sense, only then a solution can come. Otherwise, it will continue as it has been continuing for, I think, 70 years now, right? It may be another 70 years to go on with it. I think from the Indian side, we have been pressing the Chinese that if you want to have a good relationship with India or develop any kind of cooperative partnership with India, first of all, resolve the root problems. See, border problem is a root problem, which crops up at every, every moment in the drop of a hat, right? So unless until you root out the basic issue, which is a broader problem, how would you talk about overall comprehensive development of the relationship? Which is what our, External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankarji is talking about, right? That we need to resolve the border problem. So in order to resolve the border problem, I don't know whether your this model of whether China will retreat or not will work. But China needs to come out with a proper, map with a detailed, plan, and only then we can resolve that problem. And the border problem is also complicated. I have not touched in detail about the border problem in my lecture, but it is also complicated with the issue of Tibet and the Tibetans who are settled here. We have an, government in exile in India, right? How would the Chinese deal with that? That's also a very significant issue. You see, it is not just about Vietnam's whether one line or territory can be defined or not. Even if the Chinese define the territory today, again, the issue of the Dalai Lama, the successor of Dalai Lama, and the whole issue of Tibetans remains to be resolved by the Chinese. You see, so our issue is a more complex relationship and the issue than the 11-dash line or 9-dash line that you're talking about.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello,
Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah, go on, please.
Can I ask?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, go.
Hi, ma'am. Very good evening. My name is Imran. I'm calling from Mumbai, and thank you for your very beautiful lecture. I wanted to have two questions. What are the economic ties between India and China? That is the first. And second one, what are the implications of One Belt, One Road initiative for India-China relationship?
Sorry, I didn't hear your first point. I couldn't hear that. What did
My
you
first
say?
question is, what are the economic ties between India and China? That is the first one. And second one, what are the implications of the One Belt, One Road initiatives of India-China relationship?
See, as I mentioned in my presentation, BRI, the implication especially is one, because it is moving through the territorial, territories of India. There's the CPEC. So India considers POK, that's Pak occupied Kashmir, as the territory of India. Now, the CPEC corridor crosses through that. Naturally, it infringes upon our territory, and so there is a territorial issue. The second issue is that if the BRI connectivity is a very unclear kind of proposal. It is not talking about its nitty-gritties. We have seen what happened in Sri Lanka in terms of the Hambantota project, right?
Yes, yes.
The loans were granted, and the loans are on terms and conditions which are not conducive for a state to accept. And then when they are not able to repay the loans, then a lease agreement come into force, right? So whether that will happen in other neighboring states as well or not. Say, for example, in Nepal, right? What will happen with the BRI project Nepal has signed? Whether the Chinese will again give some loans, and if Nepalese are not able to repay that loans, what will happen to the Nepalese? I mean, the territory of Nepal, right? Because we see that the same issue is cropping up in Gwadar, right, with Pakistan. So the debt burden of those loans, even if China is as of now giving some relief to the Pakistanis for the loan repayment, it may not continue for years or decades. So in that context, BRI becomes a very what do you say, lack the clarity in what it wants to do. Okay, whether it wants to take the territories or whether it wants to have connectivity projects. Okay, if it wants to have connectivity projects, what happens with the small states which are being a part of that BRI? Because small states do not have that much of capacity to contribute to the infrastructure development. And if they don't have the capacity, whether the funds coming from China will be the grants or the aid, or it will be in forms of loans. Okay, these are major issues when we talk about BRI. The other thing is that it is talking about connectivity projects on a very large scale. Say, for example, railway projects, right? Again, the issue is of financial implications of who will manage the funds. You see, whether it will be managed by China or the other partner, which is there. Then the third issue is about the governance. You see, under the BRI, if somebody is going to be, controlling the, if there will be connectivity projects which are transnational, right? Then the governance issue will also crop up. All these connectivity projects are transnational. They're not just within one country, right?
it is transnational project. So who is going to be, taking care of the governance issues? Who will be the leading positions of taking the control and charge when the border crosses? You see? So all these issues are very unclear or not clearly stated by the Chinese. And this is where I think India has a lot of problems in accepting the BRI. And even if, India does not join, which is India is not a part of the BRI, and China continues with BRI and, leaves India aside, I do not think China would be able to continue in South Asia and Southeast Asia so very easily. It is already facing problems in Sri Lanka. It is facing some problems in Pakistan. It will face huge problems in Nepal, Bhutan, and other countries. And same will come up in Southeast Asia, as I see. Okay, the Maritime Silk Road it's talking about. Your other issue is about India-China, economic cooperation. So
Yes.
China and India already had as I said in 2015 itself, they had the plan of boosting economic and trade relations, crossing 100 billion mark. Today, where we stand is we have already crossed the 100 billion mark, right? We are already $135+ billion of economic, trade between India and China. But at the same time, we are facing a lot of trade deficit issues. Okay?
Right.
And this has become a very critical issue where Indian government is a little on pressure. Indian government has taken initiatives of, exporting rice, sugar, other things, other commodities to China, but yet we are not able to, make up for the trade deficit that is there. The other issue is about the quality. There are a lot of quality issues about the Chinese products that are coming to India. I think India will need to look into that. The third issue is about the IPR, the property rights. Many of the time when you deal with two countries, there are many cases India has already filed about, the property rights. And there are also anti-dumping, cases which India had filed against China in international, arena. So all of these issues become very important when we are talking about India-China economic trade. It is not that India does not want to trade with China, but there are a lot of restrictions by the Chinese to, let, imports come into China. While India wants to trade certain, commodities, say, for example, medicines, okay? The traditional medicines or other kinds of
Organic
medicines.
medicine.
Yeah, organic medicines. So the Chinese have a lot of restrictions on imports. Now, when we want to have economic and trade ties, naturally it has to be, when the Chinese talk about win-win, then it has to be on parity basis, right? And this is where we are lacking. So this time, I think the Modi government has really taken a very stern stand that already we have a trade deficit. This time, even with a lot of restrictions, the trade deficit is growing. It is growing 20% almost every year. But we are trying to, to boost our, economy, this thing by Make in India projects. We are, giving some incentives. But the kind of incentives China give to its exporters is huge. And we really cannot match up with the Chinese, you see. So what we are doing is we are just promoting that. But let's see within 5 years or 10 years if that makes a real change or not.
Ma'am,
Just a minute. Let others also ask questions. Give opportunity to others. Yes, next
maybe
question.
I will ask later.
Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
First of all, ma'am, it was a really interesting lecture and a very different perspective which you shared us about the India-China relationships. And I'm Vivan. I recently graduated with a bachelor's in IR. So my question, ma'am, was, do you think the term Chinese hegemony, it's media propaganda to keep us involved, and that China really only just wants a multipolar world order? Or is the CCP really trying to tip the power scales in their favor? Because when we look at the CNP index, it shows that in this century, it's not possible for China to achieve the hegemonic status. And in fact, even inside the CCP, there's an ideological divide. So could you simplify China's long-term goals here via their policies when they talk about a world order? Hello?
By the, the media narrative. You are right that maybe in, hello, can you
Yes,
hear me?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, I do not think that, hegemony, Chinese hegemony is just a narrative by the Chinese media, and it is not possible. You are right, maybe that, in this century, China will not be able to make up for their hegemonic position. Depends on the global context, depends on the global environment and the changes that happen in the global matrix, and how China is able to, sustain with its ambitions. But having said that, China never says that it is talking about hegemony. China is always talking about it is against all kinds of hegemonism. If you read any of the Chinese texts, it always says that it is talking about different kind of rule. And in China's term, scholars like Professor Yan Xuetong is advocating that we are talking about rule by virtue, like Wang Tao. It's rather than a hegemonic rule, which is Pa Tao. Now, this Wang Tao is something like the Ram Rajya we talk in India. Okay. So what China is talking about within its own countries, the debates are about this, that it wants to create a Ram Rajya where everyone is, happy. And that is where the notion of shared destiny comes into being, right? And there would be parity for everyone. But the fact of the matter is how China is engaging with its expansionist tendencies, how it is engaging with small powers, how these debt traps are created, how the win-win is always a one-side benefit for the Chinese, because every country has a trade deficit with China, almost every country, including US, right? And how the present president Xi Jinping goes into small states and threatens, and the new kinds of impositions it comes out really creates a confusion for other countries to accept that China will not be a hegemonic power. Okay. And then second thing is that because China goes back to its history all the time, China's history is also, talks about Tianxia concept, that is the, all under the heaven concept. Now, all under the heaven concept, which was really propagated by Chao Ting Yan in his, book, was also about a kind of world order where there would be a power which will be at the head, and other powers would be, subservient to the main power. Now, this is where I think, China's rule becomes very significant to be reassessed by all states. The last thing is very significant is that, how is China looking at the world order? It is only talking about, I mean, there has been a lot of debates within China, where they've talked about, two guides or the, two superpowers. Two guides means China and US. So China and US becoming the superpower. Naturally, if China and US are becoming the superpower, and we all have been a witness to US hegemonic power, then you definitely would see China as another hegemonic power. It cannot be a benign hegemony in any sense. Okay. So these are the issues which really gives us confusion on how would China be if it becomes a power. But as of now, there are challenges from many states, so it is not very easy for China to become a hegemonic power. Naturally, every state would want to become a superpower, and there has been debates within China of becoming a superpower and whether they have any competing, or parallel countries which can stand next to China. China sees none. Okay, it does not even see India as a player in the global matrix. It only sees, the Western powers as the players. So that is why we have all kinds of, what we say, suspicion about what China will become.
The last question. Come on, last question. Yes, we have detained the guest for a very long time.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
So good evening, ma'am, and thank you so much, ma'am, for such informative.
Adjust your camera. Adjust your camera. Yeah, nice one. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much, ma'am, for such an informative lecture. I'm Simran, and I'm currently doing master's right now. And my question would be, how do domestic factors such as public opinion or political consideration shapes the relationship between both the countries?
Yes, a very good question, because see, domestic factor really reshapes the foreign policy in many ways. In India, we know that the nationalistic rhetoric is reshaping because we got a stable government because of the national, rhetoric. Everyone was really wanting to have a very strong government, and BJP is there in the power. Same way in China, the national rhetoric really reshapes how China deals its foreign relations. We have seen that in China's relations with Japan. Okay, when there was friction between China and Japan, these people were on the streets. They were breaking all the cars of Japanese. They were breaking the restaurants of the Japanese, and finally, Chinese government had to interfere and say that okay, we are trying to tone down the relationship. Okay, so China Japan had to rethink its relationship. Same thing happened with China and US when US bombarded its embassy, Chinese embassy. US China relations came down. Even now, when you have the what you call the US China trade war that is going on, and to diffuse the tensions between US and China, US had to really go down, and there's a whole national rhetoric in China which is against the US, right? Americans. I think in the same way, if you see China-India relations, you see there is a point at which the whole media, the social media as well as the official media of China, will talk about anti-India things, right? It will talk about how India is being wooed by the Americans, how India is going in the lap of the Western world, how Indian poverty is a problem, how India is not performing well in its democracy. Democracy is a failed democracy, and all of those narratives. And the moment that narrative comes up, you know that Chinese government is not thinking of having cordial relations with India. Okay. And the moment you will start looking at the official as well as the social media tone down, you know that there is a kind of shift. In China, that social media is also highly controlled. So whether that is the people's perception or it is a directed people's perception, we fail to understand. But in India's context, if I see, the people's perception really creates pressure on the government of how to perform. Say, for example, on the border issue, right? When we had the problem in June 2020 of the Galwan incident, where our 20 soldiers were martyred, we the whole of India, all the people in India started to really go against China. We talked about how the Chinese have always betrayed the Indians, and there's this national rhetoric turn going. So the time when Modi shook hands with Xi Jinping in Bali, or when the first buffer zones were created, the whole national sentiments were against that. And so there was a whole pressure created on the government of how to further move ahead with the negotiations. I think it really creates a pressure on the Indian government, and we can see that pressure, coming up. I don't think Prime Minister Modi today has as a majoritarian government, as a very holistically it can take decisions on almost all matters. Can it take a decision to just give up territories of border and say that we want to resolve by giving up the territories to China? No, that is not possible, right? Because we have a whole people's sentiments, aspirations linked to it, right? So it will have to keep those aspirations in mind to create. In China, as I said, it's a little tricky to understand whether it is the people's sentiments or the government directed sentiments of the people of what it wants to do. Yeah. So we really don't get to know that. Yeah.
So with that, we come to the end of question hour session. Thank you, Dr. Geeta, for such an exhaustive and comprehensive coverage of the India-China relations. And the students have really benefited from what you have said. And there is much more to be said, but there is a time limit. We have already crossed over 90 minutes. And so with that, I will not detain you for long. We have exhausted you almost. And now with your permission, I would like to close the session.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a pleasure.